We all go through changes in our lives, from physical, mental to biological. We experience puberty and the frustrations, anger and uncertainty of it all, trying to find ourselves and where we stand in this world. We want to stand out, to not conform to society. We feel alone despite being surrounded by a sea of faces. Each day passes and each day starts the same, trapped in the cycle of mundanity, trapped in our cities, towns or villages, unable to see what lies beyond. Despite the differences we have, these emotions bloom, wither and die within us all. Are we really special? Do we stand out, or are we just one of the many faces in the crowds? We look beyond the mountains to find the other side, something more. There must be more. But what if there's nothing on the other side? Aku No Hana was a 50-chapter manga series created by Shūzō Oshimi, which ran from 2009 to 2014. Aku No Hana tells the story of Kasuga, a boy in a small Japanese town who is entering his young adult phase, and all the hormones that it entails. He goes through the day-to-day grind until one day he does something impulsive. He steals the gym clothes of Saeki, the girl Kasuga adores and idolizes. Unfortunately, Kasuga is caught by Nakamura, a girl who has nothing but contempt for everyone and everything. Nakamura sees herself as a pervert, a deviant. She cannot connect with society or other people. She views the world as bleak and dirty, that is only interested in sex, and everyone puts on a fake sense of decency. Due to this, she refers to everyone as shitbugs. She believes Kasuga to be the same as her, a deviant. She enters Kasuga into a contract to slowly peel away at his fake sense of decency, to bring out the deviant and perverted side within him. Nakamura wants to bring Kasuga's deviancy to the surface. She is hoping to find something more in life, to find out if there is something that lies behind the mountains that encloses their town, to make it to the other side. Aku No Hana deals with various subjects that are very relatable to anyone who has gone through the young adult stages of their lives. It deals with issues such as puberty and the intense emotions and feelings that come along with this difficult period of our lives. It discusses sexual awakening and sexual attractiveness within a young person and how to deal with those feelings, and in the case of our main characters, how they deal with it in a very unhealthy way. Another element is non-conformity, with our main characters trying to prove themselves as unique and special in a town that in their eyes is dying, and they're searching for a way to escape it. An anime adaptation ran from April to June of 2013 and was directed by Hiroshi Nagahama. The 2013 anime had a lot of infamy. Rather than going for the traditional art style seen in many anime, the director decided to go for an animation style known as rotoscoping. This technique involves using live action performances and animating over them. Nagahama initially declined to make Aku No Hana into an anime as he felt that the series would be better suited in live action. However, he changed his mind once he had the idea to adapt it into an animation using rotoscoping. For Nagahama, this direction would give a sense of realism that traditional anime style wouldn't be able to give to a story like this. Oshimi, the original creator, was on board and very supportive of Nagahama's vision of the anime. Both the director and the creator wanted to leave an impression on the viewers, whether it was positive or negative. They went into creating the show knowing that it would face some controversy. 6 years later, in 2019, a live-action adaptation was released in Japan that attempts to tell the whole story of Aku No Hana in just over 2 hours. The film is directed by Noboru Iguchi. His film career is interesting, as he has worked within the adult film industry in Japan for many years before moving into directing various horror and black comedy films. This seems like a match made in heaven for a live-action Aku No Hana film, as the anime does have the tag of psychological thriller or even possibly a horror. It does delve into the frustrations of puberty and the feelings of lust and sexuality within it. So someone like Iguchi could bring in some of his previous experiences in the genres that he's worked in to tell a story that is quite disturbing and even somewhat controversial, like Aku No Hana. Aku No Hana doesn't have any otherworldly or spiritual elements to it. There is no external threat to our characters or the people in the town. The suspense, tension and fear comes from the fear of being exposed, being outed by society, because an element of your personality is being exposed. The fear of people finding out about a side of you that you want to keep hidden, and even the fear of a secret being discovered. The anime explores this very well, but the question is, does the film portray these elements just as well as the anime? Well, that's something that we will be covering later in this series. The anime ran for one season. It never got a chance to tell the full story. The 2019 film, on the other hand, attempts to take this 50-chapter manga series and condense it into 2 hours. It's worth mentioning that there may be some references to the manga as well. Full disclosure though, I have personally never read the manga. My good friend Rob from Hell Plus has read them. He has discussed with me the major plot points of the manga, so most of my knowledge of the original work comes from him. But the focus of this video is on the anime and the film, not the manga. This video will be divided into 6 parts. Parts 3 and 5 will be the main comparison elements of the video, so if you wish to skip to those parts, please look at the time codes below. But right now, I would like to go over my own personal experiences and opinion of the anime in part 2.
Aku no Hana. Anyone who's been hearing about it for the last few months, or anyone heard about it when it came out, will know it's probably one of the most controversial shows to ever come out, with all of its rotoscoping and slow pacing and all. Now, here at Anime Reviews, we're not the sort of people to say something crazy or very different for sensationalist purposes.
Yeah, so with that in mind, Aku no Hana is flipping awesome. Deal with it, Obama. 800 degrees. Techno music. Boom. Owned you all. Respect. Word to your mother and father. It was April of 2013. I was 19 years old. I was nearing the end of my first year of university. My teens were coming to an end and I was starting my 20s by the end of that year, the big 2-0. I look back and I see a lot more hopefulness and happiness. A small part of that was due to the ignorance of world events around me. Another element was the excitement of beginning my own career. I was starting to forge my own path forward in life. My teen years were filled with many ups and downs, but I want to focus on the positive elements. It was during my mid to late teens that I rediscovered anime. I got involved with the community, mainly with a small channel called Aku No Video. It was there I first started to engage with other anime fans and how I met my good friend Rob. He was a co-host on the live shows and I asked if we could collaborate, and we kept collaborating and chatting until we became very good friends, even to this day. I found Aku no Hana on a list of 2013 spring anime. I wanted something new and interesting to watch for myself and to review on our old YouTube channel, Anime Reviews. I watched the first episode and I was enthralled. It was so strange, unnerving, unconventional that it had me hooked every second I watched it. Me and Rob fell in love with this show, and every week when a new episode came out, we would jump on Skype, watch it, and talk about it for ages. It was so good that it got Rob to start reading the manga, and he would tell me the differences and similarities between the manga and the show, as well as explaining to me what happens after the anime had ended. It meant so much to us. The show spoke to us in ways few anime did. We did a commentary on the last episode, and we did a review for the series the night the final episode was done. We defended the show and discussed our love for it during a time where this anime was having a lot of heated debate. Back in 2013, when the show came out, many in the anime community were quick to write it off and dismiss the show purely on its aesthetic. The rotoscoping for many people was a joke, and the slow pacing of the show gave the initial impression that it was boring and nothing happens. Manga purists shouted out about how ugly the show was and saw it as a bastardization of these characters. There were various comments, forums, articles, videos, and memes made about the show, which basically boiled down to 2 things: the rotoscoping sucked and its pacing.
I mean, I can overlook animation usually, especially in a series like this, but the art style and the way it was animated in general is just... God! Give me a fucking break! It ruined the series, really.
There is an anime for this, but to be honest with you, in my personal opinion, I highly recommend do not even touch that anime, because what they did was they had live actors pretty much film these scenes and then they drew on that. It's like totally different. Just picture this girl looking like fucking Fred Flintstone or some shit. They really butchered it. And
I don't know if Zexcs had budget problems when they started this or they just gave up in general, but this is atrocious quality when it comes to animation, especially in today's standards.
Most wrote it off after the first episode due to these 2 factors. Hell, if you look at the replies and comments of the episode discussions on my anime list, there is a huge drop off in the discussions after episode 1, with episode 13 only having a total of 303 comments compared to the over 1,500 comments on episode 1. Even the polls from the first episode showcased just how divisive it was. This still happens to this day. I want to highlight a comment that really got on my nerve. 5 seconds. You couldn't get past 5 seconds of this anime, so all you saw was this? And that was enough to judge the whole anime, was it? Did you even give it a chance? Did you even go into it with an open mind? Anime doesn't have to have the same art style. It can be different. It can have different styles. It can be over-exaggerated. It can be over the top. It can be dirty and gritty. It doesn't all have to be this squeaky clean metropolitan setting. If everything looks and acts the same, then we're just conforming to the same style that we've seen over and over again. Don't condemn this anime for just having a different voice, or condemning it because it dares to have a different interpretation or a different art style that doesn't conform to your normal anime look. We have so many anime out there that look so similar that this one is one of the very few that have the goal to stand out, to appear different. Cause you know, it's all about the aesthetic. That's what matters at the end of the day, how pretty something looks, not its characters, themes, depths, substance or meaning.
It's kind of a really nice day.
That's why it's such a beautiful day, a compilation of 3 short animated films set around a character named Bill, directed by Dong Hertzfeldt. It's just downright awful, isn't it? I mean, sure, it's just a film that explores the human condition as we experience Bill's life and explore the physical and mental degradation of this man, as we see and hear the chaos within his mind, with such hauntingly beautiful and even comic imagery, which is an allegory from under hell that showcases the fragility of our minds and our memories as he slowly loses his. But not only that, the film deals with the concept of death itself, as Bill sees a number of his relatives pass and he has to face his own death. The film showcases that death isn't important. What is important is how beautiful life truly is, and the beauty of it comes from the fact that it is finite, that it doesn't last forever. And we must stop worrying about the awkward moment of death and just witness the beauty, the majesty of life itself, and we need to experience it rather than let the worry of our own mentality get in the way of enjoying life.
Isn't this amazing? Isn't everything amazing?
But, you know, it's shit, because it's just stickmen with no backgrounds, because deep, meaningful commentary only works when you're fucking TNA and a mech suit. So if the community hating on it wasn't bad enough, something else came out around the same time that helped showcase the stark contrast in tone and style to other anime on the market. Yep, that's right. Aku No Hana came out on April 5th, 2013, and Attack on Titan came out 2 days after on April 7th. Not only was this based on the best-selling manga of all time, but the anime adaptation became a worldwide hit as well. Now, I'm not making a comparison between them as they are 2 very different genres and have very different audiences. What I want to highlight is, as a fan and defender of the Aku No Hana anime, it felt like the deck was stacked against us. It never stood a chance and was overshadowed completely by this Goliath of a franchise. In hindsight, myself and Rob being hopeful for a second series was adorably innocent.
In this next scene where we're going to have a very long discussion about what the future is for this show, because for those who don't know, we season 2 the show pretty much says at the very end that season 2's been made, actually, because there's so much animation from it. It also tells us where season 2 is going. We'll get to that when we get to it, I think.
Auteur art house anime won't bring in a big enough crowd to make money, and something like this show doesn't provide much merchandising possibilities. I do want to make some positive comments after focusing so much on the negative. As the series progressed in 2013, there were more and more positive reactions to the show. By the time the series had ended, several anime YouTubers as well as articles were available that provided a more positive coverage of the show. On Anime News Network, Carl Kimlinger listed The Flowers of Evil, which was the English name of Aku No Hana. He listed it as the best anime of 2013, and Nick Creamer on the same website gave it a glowing review when he reviewed the Blu-ray version a year later. Even more recently, there has been some positive coverage of the anime, with a recent featurette on Crunchyroll discussing the external dread of The Flowers of Evil. It's a fun, light-hearted article, as you can tell by its title. Aku No Hana is also directly responsible for Hiroshi Nagahama being given directorial duties for the upcoming Uzumaki anime. This tweet goes over how the Uzumaki anime came into existence, as Junji Ito wasn't keen on Uzumaki being adapted into anime. When he heard Nagahama's name as a possible director for the project, he reconsidered it because he was a huge fan of Aku No Hana. Because of this, he entrusted Nagahama to direct this series, and looking at some of the teasers, you can feel some of the DNA of Aku No Hana in it. The anime has also been considered a hidden gem from most people. With the release of the film in 2019, it has got some people thinking about the show again. Regardless of what you may think of the film, it was the catalyst for me and my friend Rob to rewatch the show and discuss it like we did back in our teens. There was this nice feeling of nostalgia, almost like we went back in time. So if anything, I do have to thank the film for doing that for us, to bring us back to this series. After rewatching this video and getting some feedback from my friend Rob, it became quite clear that this video can be quite inaccessible to anyone who hasn't seen the anime or has read the manga. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a breakdown of the overall story of Aku No Hana. So please feel free to skip to the time code seen on screen and in the description below. It's also worth mentioning as well that there is going to be spoilers from here on out, going over intricate details of both the anime, film and elements of the manga. So if you don't want to know anything about the show, then please feel free to watch it and then come back to this video. Our story takes place in a small Japanese town surrounded by mountains. The town itself is rustic and decaying. It almost feels like it's dying. In that town lives Kasuga, who has a love of literature, specifically the works of Charles Baudelaire. He has a big crush on a girl called Saeki, who is the most popular girl in his class. She's smart and is very much beloved by everyone in her class. One evening, he returns back to class to pick up a book of poems known as The Flowers of Evil. He sees on the floor Saki's gym clothes. He is drawn by them. He picks them up and starts to fondle and caress them, but then he hears a sound. He thinks someone has seen him. In a moment of pure desperation, he takes the clothes and runs home. The next day, it's announced to the whole class that someone has stolen Saki's gym clothes. The whole class is worried because they think that there is some pervert on the loose. On his way home, Kasuga is confronted by Nakamura. She requests him to take him beyond the hills, but then confronts Kasuga and tells him that she saw him take the clothes. Nakamura then asks Kasuga to meet her after school in the library. There, Kasuga meets up with Nakamura but also Saki. Nakamura pushes Kasuga into Saki, who then runs away out of embarrassment. Nakamura then tells Kasuga that they are now in a contract together and he must write an essay about his feelings towards Saki. The following day, Kasuga does not write the essay, but instead presents her with a copy of The Flowers of Evil, saying that this has all of the feelings and emotions that he feels. However, she rejects this as she wanted to hear his perverse thoughts and feelings written down on paper, and because he refused to do so, she punishes him by forcing him down to the ground and making him wear Saki's gym clothes. She then tells Kasuga that he has to hang out with her every day after school. They begin to hang out at a riverbed where Nakamura asks Kasuga about his feelings towards Saki. The next day in class, one of the students thinks that someone has stolen her money. The whole class is on edge after what has happened earlier that week. The classmate accuses Nakamura in front of everyone. Kasuga then stands up for her, which causes the whole class to murmur and wonder what is going on between Kasuga and Nakamura. Saki is impressed and talks to Kasuga and saying that it was the right thing to do to stand up for her. Kasuga then gets the courage to ask Saki out on a date. Nakamura overhears this and instructs Kasuga to meet him just before the date. Nakamura then gets Kasuga to wear Saki's gym clothes underneath his own during the whole date. Throughout the date, Nakamura can be seen always watching, always observing Kasuga, which puts him on edge. She instructs Kasuga to kiss Saki at the end of the date, but he refuses, begging Saki to enter a purely platonic relationship. Because Kasuga refused to do Nakamura's whim, she once again punishes him by throwing a bucket of water over his head, almost exposing the gym clothes. Nakamura then tries to befriend Saki and slowly gets into Kasuga's head, making him think that Saki wants a more physical relationship with him, and he is adamant to refuse this belief. Saki thinks that there is something going on between Kasuga and Nakamura after seeing them together in the library. She doesn't go to school the next day, and Kasuga builds up the courage to go see her at her home. Kasuga and Saki talk. He learns that she has been reading a copy of The Flowers of Evil that Kasuga bought her during their date, and she says how she hopes that they can build on their relationship. Afterwards, Kasuga meets with Nakamura. He pleads with Nakamura to give the gym clothes back to Saki and to admit his wrongdoings. She then takes Kasuga to their classroom at night, telling him to confess his sins on the board. She then goes on to discuss her disdain for the town and the class and essentially her life. Nakamura is disappointed in Kasuga and says that their contract has ended, but this awakens something within Kasuga. He then proceeds to not only write his confession on the chalkboard, but with Nakamura, they trash and destroy the whole classroom. The next day, everyone sees the classroom and they are horrified, thinking that the pervert has come back again. An emergency assembly is called and it's announced that there will be a curfew due to the events that happened recently. Saki confronts Kasuga and Nakamura as she has put two and two together. She realized that it was was Kasuga who stole the gym clothes, and both of them destroying the classroom as she had noticed the Flowers of Evil drawing on the classroom floor. Saeki pleads with Kasuga, who is now at home, to open up to her, to let her know what he is thinking, what he is feeling. Kasuga's mother confronts him as she has found the ink-stained clothes and is worried and concerned that he is the one that destroyed the classroom. He runs away. He runs to the hideout of both him and Nakamura. He finds her there. They plan to run off to go beyond the hill. That evening, Saeki notices Kasuga's mother frantically looking for them, asking people if they have seen her son. Saeki realizes that Kasuga and Nakamura must have run off. She then sneaks out of the home and tries to find them. Both Kasuga and Nakamura are now on the side of a road on the mountaintop. Saeki eventually finds the two of them. She once again pleads to know Kasuga to open up. But when he does, he admits that he is nothing, nobody, a poser. This causes complete emotional drainage throughout all three of our main characters. The police then arrive to take them both home, as it's been reported that they are missing. The following days, all three of our main characters are just emotionally drained from the whole experience. Kasuga then has a dream. He has a realization that he has hurt Nakamura, and he wants to repair that relationship. He then begins to write the essay that Nakamura told him to write when they first entered into their contract. He tries to read it to her, but she refuses, running away. He then attempts to post it at her home, where he meets Nakamura's father. He enters their home, gets to know a bit more about the family, and then searches out for Nakamura's room. He enters it. He finds Nakamura's diary. He learns more about her. She appears, snatching the diary out of his hands, running away. Kasuga then chases her down and tells her to enter into a new contract where they will find the other side, here in the town. Kasuga then builds a hideout for them at the riverbed. He steals the panties of all the girls in the classroom and hangs them up around the cave. They enter into a new contract. They begin to plan for the summer festival to commit self-immolation. One day, Saeki enters their hideout. She then forces herself onto Kasuga. He pushes her away, saying that he only has feelings for Nakamura. Saeki then burns down their hideout and confronts Nakamura, wondering why she can't be more like her. The night of the summer festival, both Kasuga and Nakamura are on a platform, screaming out to the world, drenched in petrol, ready to burn themselves alive. But Nakamura pushes him away and attempts to go alone, but is stopped by her father and others. 2 years have passed. Kasuga has moved from his small town into the big city. He is now in high school. He is just going through the day-to-day motions. He meets Aya Tokiwa, a girl who is similar to himself, who has a love of literature and writing. He notices her when he sees her reading The Flowers of Evil. They grow a relationship together. Kasuga opens up to her and they both go back to his hometown. He then confronts Nakamura, wondering what happened those 2 years ago, but she doesn't remember and she doesn't care anymore. And they just have a play fight and fight in the sea, ridding themselves of the baggage that happened many years ago and possibly finding a way to move on. Before we begin, I want to lay down a rule about how we will be referring to different sections of the overall Aku No Hana story. At the end of episode 13 of the anime, it says end of Act 1. It does seem that the intention was to have an act structure for this anime. Act 1 is essentially where Kasuga is wrestling with his internal thoughts and feelings before ultimately submitting to Nakamura. Based on the end of episode 13, it appears that Act 2 would have covered the events leading up to the summer festival and the attempted self-emulation. And if there was an Act 3, it would have covered the high school portion of Kasuga's life after the 2-year time jump in the manga. Right, I think it's time for the comparisons. Let's start with comparing how the anime and the film represent their characters. What's going to be interesting about doing these comparisons is that we are essentially comparing two actors' performances due to the rotoscoping used in the anime. Because don't forget, in other anime, the animators interpret pages of the manga and create and frame scenes based off of the book and production storyboards. Whereas with rotoscoping, the animators rely on the live action footage and performances to create the animated scenes and sequences. They do follow the manga direction as well as other pre-production material to frame the scenes. And sure, we do also have the voice actors as well, which does add to the overall performance, but the mannerisms, facial expressions and body language all come from the body performances. Our main character Kasuga is shown to be a somewhat pretentious person. He thinks himself smart and different from everyone else due to his passion for reading, specifically older literature like The Flowers of Evil. He has an air of self-importance, but that is somewhat diminished when we see how timid, awkward, and downright uncomfortable he can be around others. It does seem like he has social anxiety, or at the very least is socially awkward, specifically when he is near Saeki. His obsession with her manifests in a very unhealthy fashion with how he views her and how he handles his attraction to Saeki. So how does the film and anime portray this character? In both the anime and the movie, there are moments where Kasuga will internally monologue. Now this is a standard and somewhat effective trope used in anime and entertainment media in general. In the anime we do hear him quote the Flowers of Evil poems.
人界も地獄もこの者は傷つけ得ずとまた我に値する神秘なる冠を甘んにはあらゆる時代あらゆる国を動員すべきを
discuss his admiration for the author and mentions how he sees himself different from others. The movie does have some monologuing, specifically during Kasuga's high school segment, but it doesn't go far enough. This is a person who is obsessed with literature and this book, but we have no sense of that in this film except for maybe 2 or 3 moments. In the film, he talks about the book when he's on a date with Saeki, he mentions it in a monologue when he's reading it in class, and lastly, we see him talk about it with his love interest Aya Tokiwa briefly when he sees her reading it. These moments are few and far between, which does not emphasize Kasuga's love of literature, which in turn lowers that element of pretentiousness that this character has. Kasuga tries to read these complex books to make himself different or to be better than other people in his town, which we do find out later through his own confessions that he does it as a way to seem this way, but it turns out he's a poser. So not having Kasuga quote the poems takes away a big part of this character's personality. Kasuga in the anime is put through the psychological ringer. Nakamura wants him to be a deviant, a pervert, but Kasuga is trying to hold on to his sense of decency, as well as repressing his own attractions. In both the anime and the movie, Kasuga can be seen checking out Saeki and even Nakamura, although he does this more in the anime version. But when he does this, he catches himself doing it and looks away. It's almost voyeuristic of Kasuga. However, he looks at these feelings of sexual attractiveness in a negative sense. The way he interacts with his friends' discussion of sex and how Nakamura tries to tempt Kasuga with the idea that Saeki could be interested in him physically shows this very well. He will downright reject the idea that Saeki, the girl he loves, could be interested in something like sex. In his mind, that is something that is dirty and wrong. The anime version of Kasuga really shows his disgust and shock through his facial expressions and body reactions.
いい加減にしてくれ俺はともかくこれ以上佐伯さんを侮辱したら許さないよ
侮辱？侮辱なんかしてないけど。
してるよ絶対嘘でしょ佐伯さんがセックスなんて彼女の生成を侮辱している
The acting from the movie version of Kasuga isn't very convincing. Most of the time, he just has his mouth open and just gawking, with some awkward body language, but nothing that really shows just how badly repressed this character is. The date scene shows this very well. At the end of the date, Nakamura tells Kasuga to kiss Saeki, but he doesn't, and he pleads with Saeki to have a purely platonic relationship with him. In the anime, Kasuga is seen visibly distressed by the whole affair.
俺は変態じゃない佐伯さん私と純粋にプラトニックなお付き合いをしてください
We even get a daydream sequence where he envisions Saeki as a literal angel descending from the clouds. Even the way he just shouts and talks to Saeki in this moment shows that this is a person who is tormented not just by Nakamura but by his own thoughts and urges. The movie version doesn't have any of that. The actor never really gives us that burst of emotions like the anime counterpart does. It just feels like a half-assed plea.
違う俺は変態じゃないえ佐伯さん私と純粋にプラトニックなお付き合いをしてください
This could be due to the director or the actor themselves, but I think another element is that the film doesn't fully flesh out Kasuga's own insecurities. It doesn't show just how much of an effect Nakamura has had on him. Even the significance of him going out with Saeki is missing in the film version. After the date with Saeki, in the anime version, Kasuga is seen crying in relief as he feels as if he is saved, that he's being purified and becoming a good person again. But the movie version never gives us a chance to see this conflict within Kasuga. The body acting in the anime is more interesting compared to the movie. For example, at the start of the show, we see these dead-eyed stares and looks in Kasuga. This shows that he is just kind of going through the motions, almost like he's on autopilot. He isn't fully awake or conscious yet. After the events on the mountain, it feels like Kasuga is dead and he is dragging himself around, and it really feels like he's a lifeless husk. The facial expressions that is brought on by the body actor really showcases Kasuga's social anxiety and uneasiness of the whole affair. He can be visibly seen distressed throughout the whole series, and this may be strange to point out, but Kasuga's face is always sweating. There's noticeable sweat drops on his face, which does emphasize his discomfort. The film version doesn't fully utilize the physical acting, such as facial expressions and body acting. The parts of the film that are covered in the anime really shows a disconnect between these two actors. The film versions are so rushed that Kasuga's emotional and psychological state aren't fully explored. As such, that sense of anxiety, stress and discomfort in Kasuga's demeanor isn't really on display in the film. To make a quick comparison with the anime, after the mountain scene, we have this sense of a lifeless Kasuga, but the movie doesn't give us time to see this. The most we got was Kasuga playing with his retractable pencil, looking somewhat depressed, but that doesn't really give us a chance to fully see how depressed and low he is at this point. Now, to be a bit more balanced, I will talk about some of the elements of the film that does it right. There are some hints of Kasuga's awkwardness when he asks Saeki out.
じゃあ一緒に行く今度の日曜とか。
いいよ。
本当に？
And we can see a burst of energy when he is discussing the flowers of evil during their date.
中1の時初めて読んで世界の色が変わったんだ。今までの自分は何も知らないバカだったって。とにかくすごい言葉がかっこよくて。
すごい。
He does become more interesting after the events seen in the anime. In their hideout, we can see and hear how Kasuga has fully embraced his deviancy and has fully submitted to Nakamura. It almost feels like a different character.
僕はいつでもここにいる。たとえ僕らがこの町から出られないとしても。中村さんを退屈にはさせない。
佐伯奈々子のだけ取らなかったでしょ。なんで？
それが一番ひどいことだからだよ。
Although the film doesn't fully commit to the psychological battle within Kasuga during the events of the anime, the later parts of the film really kind of allow Kasuga to change and evolve slightly. He does become a bit more interesting, such as at the summer festival when both Nakamura and Kasuga are attempting self-emulation. When they give their speech to the town, you can feel a bit of their frustration and anger with society essentially.
誰も聞かない。遠くの山の向こうで響く。あの花の咲く音を誰も聞かない。クソ虫が、クソ虫が、クソ虫が、クソ虫が、クソ虫が。
And when he kind of screams out when Nakamura pushes him off, you feel it. You feel that he is hurt and heartbroken. Even the events in the high school section where he's kind of lifeless almost and he finds something new. When he finds Aya, you see that life kind of blooms in him again. He finally reawakens.
それ知ってるの？悪の花。
え？誰だっけ？
あ、いや。
Although I do feel that because Kasuga's character development was extremely undermined in the Act 1 portion of the story, that his evolution throughout the film is somewhat lackluster and doesn't feel as natural as, say, the anime version does.
どこへ行っても同じだてめえが
私見てたんだよ。春日くんが佐伯さんの体操着盗んだところ。
契約させてやるのは私だろうが。ド変態野郎。
私は決めてくれないから。酒よ花花罪のね、おはって酒よ花花鉄棒、ダメが出るよ。花花咲いては落ちる希望水、勘弁しない。
Nakamura is a classmate of Kasuga's. She is uninterested in the world around her. She shows nothing but utter contempt for the town that she is trapped in and the people who live there. She is extremely antisocial. As such, she is ignored by her classmates, who are disturbed by her behaviour. When Nakamura has to interact with other people, she is very brief and is very flat in her expression and voice. She hates the world and refers to everyone in it as shitbugs, or a sea of shitbugs, who put on a facade of respectability, but really they're only interested in one thing: sex. There is another layer to her that is explored in the manga, film, and is also hinted at in the anime, that is that she has a lot of internal issues and is distressed, almost tortured by her own sexual nature.
私ね、もうずっと前からムズムズしてるの。体の下の方の中の方が叫び声を上げたくなるほどモヤモヤしてるの。
After witnessing Kasuga smell and steal Saki's gym clothes, she views him as someone who is similar to herself, but is hiding his true nature due to polite society standards. Their relationship is the core of this story. She initially treats him like a plaything, but there are hints of a more personal connection as the story progresses, and this is seen in the manga, anime, and film. Nakamura is a very dominating presence. When she shows up on screen, she takes over it. We see how deviant she can be. We also see just how manipulative, controlling, and cold she can be as well. The affiliation between Nakamura and Kasuga in Aku No Hana is similar to that of a S&M relationship, with Nakamura being the dom and Kasuga being the sub. I do think that's a good starting point when describing these two characters, and both the film and anime showcase this side of that relationship. The anime has various scenes that have Nakamura looking down or trapping Kasuga by getting up close and invading his personal space. We can see that Nakamura can dominate over him both physically and mentally.
決めた。全部剥がす。春日くんのかぶってる皮、私が全部剥がす。分かったら早く着ろよ。春日くんが盗んだ佐伯さんの体操着。
春日くんの皮を全部剥がす。中村さんの言葉が僕の頭の中をぐるぐる回っていた。
In the movie, her mannerism seems more playful and mischievous, but there are times where her more dominating and intimidating presence can be felt, such as her scene in The Hideout. The way she speaks and her mannerisms really give the impression that she is in control. She has this cold look, which is complemented by her stern tone of voice. Her body language here speaks for itself, as it shows the control and domination that she has.
ふざけんなよ。契約させてやるのは私だろうが。ド変態野郎。わかったか。
But the issue that the film has is that this side of Nakamura is only fully realized once we pass the ending point of the anime, the end of Act 1. The parts before that don't fully capture this side of her personality. Some examples can be seen when Nakamura confronts Kasuga about the gym clothes and entering him into a contract. Music and pacing aside, I do feel that the movie version undermines some of her intimidating elements by adding this mischievous laughter several times, which makes her more playful, almost like a mischief maker.
春日くん、バラさないでやってもいいよ。その代わり私と契約しよ
The way Nakamura does her large smile and grin in the film doesn't really impact the viewer like in the anime. I think the rotoscoping does help to enhance the creepiness of Nakamura's sadistic joy that she gets out of manipulating Kasuga, as that smile looks so unnatural. This could be down to the uncanny valley effect that is induced by the rotoscoping art style, which makes the visual of her toothy grin uncomfortable to look at as it tries to look realistic, but your mind knows that it's not. Other characters in the anime do have a toothy smile, which can look a little strange, however it never feels as uneasy like Nakamura's. For example, Saki's smile shows a little bit of her teeth, but it does give off this sense of innocence. It never looks as disturbing or creepy like Nakamura's. There are a number of scenes in both adaptations where she will grab, push, shove, and even hit Kasuga. However, there is a stark contrast with the physicality of the rotoscoping actors and the movie actors when comparing their scenes back to back. The movie is severely lacking any sense of force or weight behind their actions. It feels so resistant, as if the actors are worried about hurting each other, which creates awkward moments where Nakamura should be overpowering Kasuga or even hurting him, but it feels like it's play fighting, and it's honestly embarrassing to watch.
そうだよ。当たり前じゃん。はっ。早く書けっつってんだろ。書けよ。おい。
The way Nakamura speaks and her body language really gives off this sense of a seductress or a temptress to Kasuga. The way that she invades Kasuga's space and how she speaks to him really gives off this sexual tension between the two of them, even though she has no interest in him in that way. A great example of this is during the date episode where Nakamura pulls Kasuga to the side to talk to him. The way that she gets close to him and whispers into his ear, almost like she's whispering sweet nothings, can be seen as quite suggestive. Plus, the way that she whispers in a more calming voice really emphasizes how well that she can play with Kasuga.
佐伯さんの体にぴったりくっついていた体操着。佐伯さんの汗と匂いがたっぷり染み込んだ体操着。ほらやっぱり心臓バクバクいってる。本当は頭ん中ぐっちょぐちょ。さすが変態野郎。認めな。自分はド変態野郎だって。春日くんの中身全部さらけ出して。さもなきゃ地獄行き。
To go over some of the facial expressions of Nakamura in both the anime and the film, there are numerous times in the anime where Nakamura does these dead-eyed stares into people, which adds to her creepiness.
春日くん、なんか隠してない？春日くんは私と契約したんだよ。だから何もかも全部さらけ出さなきゃいけないの。何もかも。
The film does attempt to do something similar by having the actor do these intense eye-bulging moments, but these don't come off as creepy, more as kind of strange. She does a better job with some of her stare-downs on Kasuga, but these intense eye moments don't really stand out at all and just kind of diminishes the effect of a scene rather than enhance it. Nakamura rarely shows any vulnerability in the anime. There are a few moments where her pain and sorrow can be felt, and it's very subtle. Shortly after Kasuga's breakdown on the mountain, we see Nakamura's face, and her facial expression shows the pain and hurt by Kasuga's words. But there's something else that could easily have been missed the first time you watch this scene, and that is that there is a teardrop coming down her face. Because of the continuous rainfall, it does mask this. So when you first watch this scene, you can easily miss this. In contrast, the film version has her visibly in tears. You do see on her face the pain and sorrow that is brought on by Kasuga's words, and you do feel that she is essentially heartbroken. But I do feel that this is somewhat against her characterization because she is so visibly vulnerable. There are numerous tears down her face. There are a few other moments in the film where we do see the more vulnerable side to Nakamura, such as in the abandoned building, where she kind of lets out all her pain to Kasuga.
クソ虫も変態もない。もう何にもない。どこへ行っても私は消えてくれないから。
This would have been way more impactful if we didn't see Nakamura so visibly heartbroken on the mountain scene. I think having her a bit more cold and hiding her vulnerabilities would have really made this scene way more impactful. The relationship between Kasuga and Nakamura is severely weakened in the film due to their interactions being reduced. The anime has multiple scenes where both Kasuga and Nakamura are at their hangout on the side of a river. She would talk to him, tease him, get into his head. It enhanced the feeling that Nakamura was slowly infesting Kasuga with these different ideas, and we can see how Kasuga slowly succumbed to her suggestions as time goes on, despite his internal struggle to not be her puppet. But we see how all these interactions and moments throughout the anime series causes Kasuga to develop some kind of Stockholm syndrome, because don't forget, he is forced to hang out with Nakamura. She is manipulating him into these situations, so he is constantly connecting with her more and more to the point where he is inevitably going to succumb to her. The film version doesn't give us enough moments where these two are alone to develop a relationship. Scenes such as the riverbed moments, as well as smaller moments where they are quote unquote hanging out, are completely missing, meaning that there isn't any major influences or seductions to the dark side from the film version of Nakamura onto the film version of Kasuga. It just feels hastily rushed to get these characters to the act 2 of the story where more interesting things happen, not realizing that the first act of Aku No Hana is just as interesting. Seeing how these two characters play off each other and seeing the psychological torment and conflict within our main character is interesting, and it allows us to kind of naturally go from a conflicting Kasuga to a more submissive and deviant. There is one interesting reading of Kasuga and Nakamura's relationship. This interpretation was done by my friend Rob from Hell Plus, so I want to give him the credit for this. So, throughout the anime, Kasuga keeps on referring to Saeki as his muse. Now, a muse, for those who don't know, is a person who is a source of inspiration, usually for creative individuals like artists. But throughout the anime and in the film, we never see Kasuga showcase his creativity due to Saeki's influence. However, we do see him express himself more and more because of Nakamura. Think about it, because of Nakamura's influence on Kasuga, whether it's positive or negative, it allowed him to showcase his pain and anguish in various different forms, such as when he destroyed the classroom. After his dream about Nakamura, Kasuga begins to write his essay about how he is a deviant, how he is a pervert, which showcases his writing ability. In the events of Act 2, like where Kasuga steals the undergarments and puts them on the statues at the school, it's almost like a public performance art piece. The attempted self-annihilation is all down to Nakamura and her influence. Without her, Kasuga would just be a normal guy. She was able to bring out this other side to him. Sure, it's darker and more antisocial, but it allowed him to be more creative. It allowed him to bring that part of him to the surface. Saeki never did this. Saeki is portrayed in the anime and film as a sweet, considerate person. She is a smart girl as well who is on top of her class when it comes to her studies and is very popular with her classmates. Due to her popularity, she is seen by Kasuga as an angelic being, even going so far as to call her a muse, whereas other boys in her class who fancy her see her in a more lustful way. Kasuga does show an interest in her physically, but as mentioned earlier, he does seem to repress these feelings. Due to the live action version covering the whole story of Aku No Hana, we do see a different side of Saeki that is not fully explored in the anime. The anime shows her falling for Kasuga, going out with him, and her attempts to connect with him before they ultimately break up. Even though she is seen to be a kind, sweet person, the anime does hint that she has her own insecurities and issues with how other people see her. But due to the anime ending at the end of Act 1 of the overall story, we never fully see her full character. character arc. The film does show the two sides of Saeki because it allows us to see the whole Aku No Hana story. However, the film version does miss out a key character transition which is present in the anime. There is a clear shift from the honest, quote-unquote innocent and caring version of Saeki to this more obsessive and colder version of her. Before Saeki confronts Kasuga and Nakamura on the mountain road, she lies to her parents about where she is going. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but the film and the anime have built up how good Saeki is, especially in the mind of Kasuga. So when she lies to sneak out of the house, this is when her corruption begins. The anime indicates this by using the crackling sound effect of the flower of evil at the start of episode 10.
大丈夫？ちょっと文房具屋さんに行ってきます。明日使うノートなくなっちゃって。すぐ戻るから。
The anime also shows us the after effects of the event on the mountaintop. She seems emotionally drained by what has happened, and there is a little moment where she puts on the facade of being happy, such as when Saeki breaks up with Kasuga in front of her friend. She goes from this drained look to a happier one, which hints that there is more to Saeki than appears.
佐伯さんにはきっと僕なんかよりふさわしい人がいる。
今までありがとう。お別れしよう。
This is missing from the film, however, due to the film covering more elements of the story that is not seen in the anime, it allows us to see the descent of her character from purity to deviancy. It's clear that she is obsessed with Kasuga and is deeply impacted by the relationship between him and Nakamura. There is a scene in this film which is supposed to show this. We see Saeki watching Kasuga enter the hideout, which suggests that she is stalking him, which is disturbing, but this scene is ruined by a very hokey moment where Saeki is seen rubbing her arms and shivering like she's taking heroin. There is the scene where she forces herself upon Kasuga, which really shows the depths of her deviancy and corruption at this point in the story. Now, I'm not going to show or talk about the scene itself as it is a very delicate topic and it's a controversial element of the story, but I'll just talk around elements about that. Now, this scene just doesn't happen out of nowhere. At this point in the story, it's quite clear that her obsession with Kasuga is extremely unhealthy. Her own insecurities and the descent of her good nature brings her to this extreme decision. But the film doesn't show us enough of her obsession and insecurities to really show us why she came to this decision. From what I have been told, the manga does discuss her obsession with Kasuga. In fact, Saki's best friend constantly calls her out on the ridiculousness of her obsession because Kasuga is the only person that's ever gone out with her, the only person to ever confess their feelings to her. So her friend is constantly saying, look, why are you obsessing over this dude? The film version doesn't delve into that element of it. We don't get enough of that obsession, enough of those insecurities to really kind of understand why she went to such extremes. The anime does suggest that there is an internal struggle within Saeki. When she confronts Nakamura, Saeki says that she has no idea what she has been through and how going out with Kasuga made her feel like a jewel. She even questions why she isn't good enough for Kasuga, as we have seen multiple times that he is hiding something from her.
どうして中村さんを追いかけるの？どうして？私ダメかな？本当に嬉しかったんだもん。
One interpretation I have from this scene is because of her image that she has due to her popularity and intelligence, there is a lot of expectations on her shoulders. I think she knows how other people view her, especially the boys in her school. Kasuga was the only boy that cared about her, not just because of her outward appearance, but her internal one as well, her character. Aside from her friend, Kasuga has shown her love and compassion, and she wants to understand him more because of the love that he has shown her. We see she attempts to understand him by reading the flowers of evil, and she even pleads with him to be honest with her.
それより私はそれを隠されてた方が悲しかったよ。だから教えて。私に中村さんじゃなくて私に春日君の頭の中ちゃんと私に分からせて。
There is conflict between Kasuga, Nakamura and Saeki in both adaptations, which becomes more prominent in later parts of the anime. Saeki confronts Nakamura on a few occasions in the anime due to her obsession and jealousy of Nakamura, as Saeki is aware that Nakamura has been hanging out with Kasuga recently. This element is seen in the film but doesn't provide enough context and substance compared to the anime. In the anime, there is a conflict between these two girls.
中村さん、春日君とどういう関係？契約したの。春日君はズブズブのド変態野郎だから、私にその中身全部剥かれる契約。そんな、春日君は変態なんかじゃないよ。あっそう。
Which creates a lot of tension and drama as we see how Nakamura is essentially playing mind games with Saeki. She pretends to be friends with her and starts to sow seeds of doubt about Kasuga. Saeki attempts to dismiss these claims that Nakamura is presenting to her, but Nakamura constantly fights back by saying that he is this deviant and she doesn't want to believe it. She doesn't think that Kasuga is this way because she believes that he is a good person. So there is definitely a conflict and clashing of personalities because of their different beliefs about Kasuga. The anime has a number of these kind of conflicts which are very interesting. Sadly, the film version doesn't show enough of the conflict between Nakamura and Saeki. In fact, they hardly ever share much screen presence compared to the anime. In the film, there's really only three main conflicts between these three characters: the mountain scene, the hideout scene between Saeki and Kasuga, and the aftermath of Saeki forcing herself on Kasuga. That's the only time that these films really kind of breed any kind of conflict with our three main characters. The film doesn't show the desperate attempts of Saeki trying to reach out to Kasuga. Also, her insecurities and jealousy of Nakamura are shown in the anime with scenes such as the mountain, and as well as Nakamura telling Saeki that she doesn't know the true face of Kasuga. The film version doesn't show enough of the jealousy that she feels for Nakamura. There is one or two scenes, but not enough to kind of make it feel realistic. In the movie, by the time we see her again in high school, she is a colder person. There's a good scene in Act 3 of the story where she bumps into Kasuga again. She puts on this nice, sweet face in front of him and Aya. She gets up close to Kasuga and makes a snaggy comment at his expense, followed by a very snide smirk, which in my opinion is done very well by the actor.
あの子も不幸にするの？ごめんなさい、待たしちゃって。
It really does show this change of Saeki. We also get a glimpse of her current boyfriend as well, who is essentially Kasuga's doppelganger, which reveals that even after the summer festival years ago, she has not moved on, as seemed to have either consciously or subconsciously gravitated towards someone who is like Kasuga to fill that fascination. The actors in both the film and the show do a very good job with the material. I have much more of a positive view of the film version of Saeki compared to her other two co-stars. She is good at showing the innocent, caring side of Saeki, but also the harsher elements of her as well. In the film, her emotions are not over-exaggerated and feels more natural in comparison to the film version of Kasuga and Nakamura. Saeki is the only character who is a little bit more interesting in the film than in the anime counterpart. However, this is due to the anime only covering Act 1 of the Aku No Hana story. Because the film covers the whole story, we see more of Saeki during the events not seen in the anime. So it's interesting seeing her evolution, though I do feel that the film misses a lot of substance of her descent. Even though the film covers elements of the story, specifically in Act 2, which make her more interesting, there is a lack of depth as the film is missing a lot of story moments covered in the anime that provide important context to her character progression. Now, this could be due to the fact that the film has to condense 50 chapters of a manga series into a 2-hour film. So the so-called focus for the film is more on Kasuga and Nakamura. I think if there was a second season of the anime, we could have seen a more nuanced interpretation of Saeki as opposed to this compact version. In this section, we will look at the overall presentation of the film and anime, as well as doing some scene comparisons. Firstly, let's have a look at the town that is showcased in the middle school section of the story. The use of rotoscoping allows for very high detailed backgrounds and environments. It's one of the things that makes this anime stand out from others. It's not just the highly detailed environments, but also the setting, which is quite unique for this anime compared to others as well. Rather than taking place in a large metropolitan city, this story is set in a small town, which is very neglected neglected. There is a sense that this town is dying and in decay. The town appears run down, it's kind of dirty, which really gives off this rustic look. The town itself feels enclosed due to the mountains surrounding it, which emphasizes the idea that our main characters are trapped within it. It's a far cry from more conventional high school anime settings. Both the anime and film do showcase this element of the town. However, the anime does have some more larger establishing shots and close-ups of elements of the town to show its age, to show its rust throughout the series, which really helps to make the town almost a character itself. The film does show some elements of this. The start of the film has a few large shots of the town showing the mountainous areas and some of the streets, which shows its age as well. Dirt and rust can be seen in the backgrounds of scenes like the classroom, schoolyard, and in the park where Kasuga and Saeki end their dating. In general, there are hints of wear and tear of the town in the film, but the way everything is filmed doesn't allow them to become a focal point for the viewer. Most of the shots are visually uninteresting, as it's mostly close-up of the characters. The anime does have close-ups as well, but we'll be talking about that quite soon. There are some wide shots in the film as well, but due to the lighting and contrast being very flat in most of these scenes, the environments don't really stand out. The contrast between how the anime and the film are shot really highlights to me the biggest issue with the film, and that is the lack of visual, or more specifically, a lack of film style or identity. We have mentioned that the anime uses more larger shots of the environment, but it's also worth mentioning there are a lot of close-ups as well. We get a lot of close-ups of characters in the anime, such as their eyes and faces, especially with Nakamura, which really helps to get that uneasy feeling that the anime is going for. An element of that is the rotoscoping, which does make the characters feel unnatural and uneasy, but having her basically up close to your face, it gives this feeling that she is invading the viewer's personal space. It feels very invasive. It's not just the faces of the characters that take up screen. Other elements such as characters' bodies or backgrounds will also have these intense close-ups to emphasize elements of the character's expression, body, or the environment around them. For instance, whenever Kasuga feels attracted to Saeki or Nakamura, we do get close-ups of areas that Kasuga is looking at. It's brief, but it does give us an insight into Kasuga's view, and also shows us a bit more of his voyeuristic side as well. When we have close-ups of characters such as, for example, Kasuga's eyes or faces, it really allows us to see the emotions that are on display. The anime plays around with different camera angles as well to make shots more visually interesting. Take this scene from episode 4 where Nakamura talks to Kasuga in a bathroom stall. We get various angles and close-ups which really help to make this scene not just visually more interesting, but helps emphasize the pressure that Nakamura is putting on Kasuga. To me, this kind of shows that the film doesn't really utilize different angles at all and doesn't make shots more interesting for the viewer. Another great example where the film falls flat is the use of dream sequences and visions. The anime uses these to break up some of the normality in the scenes, and I want to highlight a few that really stand out to me. There are a couple in episode 2 which are really great. For example, there's a moment where the classroom fades away to this black void that is underneath Kasuga. Another great scene is where Kasuga is daydreaming and we see the classroom fade out and we see him sitting at his desk amongst the clouds. But the best one that I want to discuss is the dream sequence from episode 11. This scene is beautiful. It starts off as a bit of a misdirect as it appears that Kasuga is walking alone at night, but it slowly transforms into this endless field of flowers with these red and orange coloured swirls in the sky, almost making it look like the town is engulfed in flames. We see Nakamura at the centre and we have all the flowers dispersed in a huge gust of wind, blowing them away in this lovely twister. It's visually stunning. All these sequences in the anime emphasize elements of Kasuga's thoughts and feelings. They are used to enhance and develop our main character. The flowers that we see throughout the series are a great example of this. The flowers of evil in the anime are used to signify a change, revelation, or an awakening within Kasuga, and it's usually something related around being a deviant or something of a defiant nature. Episode 1, we see it to awaken, which shows that the evil within Kasuga is starting to bloom. Episode 7, we see a large painting of the flower on the floor when he first embraces his rebellious side and breaks free. The dream sequence in the field is when Kasuga realizes how much pain he has caused Nakamura and he wants to help her, heal her, and also there are hints that he has feelings towards her as well. Then, by episode 13, Kasuga has fully submitted to Nakamura and the flower has fully awakened within him. All this imagery adds more layers to the show, but the film version never really utilizes this. It uses some imagery but never fully commits to it. For instance, at the start of the film, we see a large flower of evil bloom over the buildings. We see the same flower 3 more times after this, once at the summer festival, another at the end of the film where it fades away, and in a post-credit sequence where the flower appears to a young girl. The issue here is that this flower doesn't really hold any significance in the film due to lack of discussion or use of quotes from Charles Baudelaire's poems, which is due to them being mostly omitted from Kasuga's personality. But also these flowers are hardly used, so when they turn up, it doesn't hold any meaning or any significance to the viewer. They are used so sparingly, and in the very few moments that they are used, their meaning can be lost to the viewer. There is one really good use of imagery in the film, which is when Kasuga is writing his thoughts and feelings and experiences in middle school for Aya in the 3rd act of the Aku No Hana story. While Kasuga is writing his own life story, behind him we see Nakamura from the summer festival drenched in petrol, which is great imagery. It's really well done, which makes me question why we didn't get more of this.
僕はあの日の君に
A criticism of the anime when it came out was the pacing, as this is a very slow anime. I can understand the frustration that people had thinking that it's just padding. The first episode has 2 minutes and 23 seconds of Kasuga and other students walking to school, and this is at the start of the episode. Episode 8, infamously, has almost 6 minutes of Kasuga and Nakamura walking back home. This slower pace might be something normal anime viewers may not be used to and may find it boring, but I think these slow moments really allows the viewer to get into the mindset of these characters. The first episode is a great example of this, as we experience Kasuga's mundane life, so we see and understand how unfulfilling and dull it is for him. We get to experience how he feels by just having some dedicated time to experience a slice of his daily life. The anime is a psychological thriller, or more accurately, a psychological horror, so the slow pacing allows for more suspense and more tension to be built within scenes. And this is amplified even more so by the soundtrack, which adds to those thriller and horror tones. I'm going to be talking about the music in my scene comparisons, but I thought I really want to quickly highlight that the anime really has a strong musical identity, using these ethereal sounds and very creepy sort of mood music, which really enhances the scenes, changing it from what would be a dramatic scene into more of a psychological thriller, making it really more intense and impactful to the viewers. Whereas the film version uses quite a lot of generic sounds and stuff that doesn't really impact the viewer in any way whatsoever. It never finds its own identity with its music, unlike the anime. A few examples are from episode 2, where Kasuga has Saki's gym clothes with the intention of returning them. We see him enter the classroom and make his way to his desk. The slow pacing of Kasuga walking to his desk with the music really helps us to understand the stress and tension within this character, as we the viewer know what he has done. Even when the teacher asks if there's anything the class wants to bring up, we have this foreboding tone. We get close-ups of Kasuga and the bag, which emphasizes the weight on Kasuga's shoulders, and we feel the fear building within him. He wants to confess but fears the consequences, so decides to remain silent.
じゃあ連絡は以上。お前らから何か連絡事項はあるか?
Another great example can be seen in episode 8. Kasuga is walking to school after trashing it the night before. We have seen these scenes from the first episode, but there is this cloud of anxiety and worry over both Kasuga and the viewer, as we know what he has done, and has also incriminated himself by literally signing his confession on a chalkboard. Even as he approaches the door to the classroom, the tension and dread builds until he enters the room. There are many moments in this anime that just allows the viewer to be lost in the moment. Now, whether you like the anime or not, you must admit that the show is consistent with its tone, pace and style. The same cannot be said about the film. The film's pacing is all over the place, going through many plot points in quick succession. The film doesn't allow elements of Aku No Hana's first act to be slow or take its time, which means that the tone for a lot of this film is nowhere near as effective as the anime. Because it's having to go through Act 1 so quickly, it loses a lot of scenes that had dread, fear and tension that were present in the anime version and not as effective in the film version, and I wonder if that's because of the limited runtime. Let's look at the film version of when Kasuga enters the classroom after trashing it. The camera angle here is quite good as the focus is on Kasuga's back, and then we pan to the classroom interior as he enters it, but there isn't any build-up of tension in this moment like in the anime version.
Kasuga! 変態が出たんだよ。
何かあったのかな。
There's no use of music, it's quite quick, it feels like it should have been a little bit slower, as we don't get a sense that Kasuga is fearful or has any anxiety about entering the classroom. He should be scared, but he looks unfazed. He just seems to be casually strolling in like it's any other normal day. However, when the film version goes past Act 1, which is where the anime ends, you do notice a change in some of the acting and even some of the pacing. It feels like a completely different movie at some point. The moment where Kasuga and Nakamura are in their hideout, it takes its time to slowly reveal the interior. We talked about this scene earlier. Kasuga is acting more submissive, Nakamura is more dominating, and this whole section, the film takes its time. It's fairly well paced, but even with these slight areas of improvement in the film, it still feels like a bullet point version of the story. We hardly see Kasuga and Nakamura's full descent into deviancy. We get Kasuga putting the panties on the school statues, but after that, we have this montage of Kasuga and Nakamura during their summer holidays, and the tone is just strange.
どこへ行っても何も変わらない。二人で。
The music is very upbeat and Kasuga and Nakamura are riding around happy and smiling. We see them in their hideout planning something and doing some very peculiar drawings. This is just weird and feels so out of place. I wonder if the director was trying to create some kind of juxtaposition where these two characters are making these creepy drawings in this hideout with this nice music in the background. If that was the intention, it doesn't work. It just adds to the confusing tone that this film has. This scene where they're in their hideout with these weird drawings and writings and a slight trigger warning for a 7-letter S word, this is where they're planning their suicide at the summer festival. And I think this element of the story needs better exploration rather than this strange happy summertime montage. Both the anime and the film are adaptations of the manga, and that's the key word. Adaptation. Each director and writers will have their own way of telling an existing story. It's fine to omit things, alter or even completely change them as long as it keeps the core message of the original work. Look at the MCU films. They are not true page-by-page retellings of the comics. Many elements such as the characters' backgrounds, the storylines are altered and changed to suit different audiences, and it works well because not only do they keep the core fundamentals of those characters, but they also tell engaging and compelling storylines. Here we're comparing a 13-episode anime where episodes are around 23 minutes long to a film that's approximately 2 hours long. Now film and TV are two very different beasts. They have different kind of formatting styles and different ways of doing things. So just because the anime has more time to tell a story doesn't inherently mean that it's going to be better than the film version. A good director can tell a lot with a short amount of time, but the film version of Aku no Hana chops so much context and meaning that it leaves the bare bones of the story, especially in the first act. Later on during scene comparisons, I will discuss how the lack of context hurts the film. Lighting is another element which is very underutilized in the film in comparison to the anime. The anime has various times of day throughout the story, which gives more visual impact to the show, whereas the film appears to mainly use very flat lighting throughout most of it. A lot of outdoor scenes feel like they take place in the early afternoons. The film doesn't play around with different exterior lighting much. Even though there are a few night scenes, we hardly have anything set in dusk or evening. Overall, there are very limited lighting options that are presented to the audience. A good example of this is the ending of the anime, where Kasuga is chasing down Nakamura and tackles her to the ground. We clearly see that it's dusk, and we see these stunning yellows, oranges, and even purple colours in the skies, which is just so captivating, whereas the film is just another afternoon shot. These afternoon shots in the film all look the same. I mean, look at these two shots at different points in Act 1 and tell me that they don't look like the same time of day. There are also some inconsistent lighting in scenes. For instance, shortly after Kasuga is confronted by Saeki in the hideout, we see this exterior shot. Now pay attention to the lighting. It appears to be like a late afternoon, possibly early evening, but when Kasuga runs out of the hideout and turns around to see it on fire, the time of day seems to be late evening, slowly going into the night. And then the next shot on the roadside, it's just fully night. We have 3 different times of day in the span of 5 minutes. Here is a more glaring transition of times of day. We see Kasuga and Nakamura biking their way up the mountain. Again, the exterior lighting suggests that it's an afternoon setting, and although we do get some shots of the clouds and the town to indicate a passage of time, the next scene on the mountain road is pitch black. It's completely night, which suggests that it's taken hours for them to get to this location. The anime did this transition way more naturally. First, we have Kasuga running away from home and going to their hideout on the riverbank. Already we see a huge improvement from the lighting here compared to the film, as it's clearly an evening shot. Also, just to mention, the lighting on Nakamura with the god rays illuminating her, it's an amazing shot. When they both set off from their hideout, we see the lighting go from this evening shot to early night, which feels far more natural. Another example of poor lighting can also be seen in the aftermath of the classroom trashing. In the anime, we see both our characters walking home, and it's very clear by the dark elements of the sky, as well as the colours, that it's a very early morning, like 4 or 5 AM shot. It's still a bit dark, but it feels like the town is still asleep, whereas in the movie, it's closer to like 8 AM. The exterior lighting that we've just talked about also affects the passage of time, as it feels very inconsistent. Because most of the afternoon scenes have the same lighting, it creates this feeling that no time has passed. And as you've seen with the examples that we've just talked about, we have situations where we have these stark contrasts between 2 times a day, which makes you wonder how long characters were talking or doing something to go from 2 very distinct lighting. The interior lighting during the daytime sections is also very flat, almost like we're surrounded by fluorescent lighting. The white balancing of these interior scenes are really lacking as well. Just everything about these interior sets look cheap and bland. Because of the backlights and white balancing, if there's anything white in the scene like shirts or drapes, they just stick out like a sore thumb. It looks more like a cheap TV soap opera than a film. There are many times during the interior shots where these characters seem to be sitting in rooms that are just in white voids. You can see it in various windows in these interior shots where we see that there is this intense white that is attempting to block anything out from the outside. It feels like it's an environment in a video game, that there are interior sections and there's nothing outside these 4 walls. It just looks odd. Now, in the interest of appearing fair, I will say that there are a few good moments of lighting in the film as well. The scene where we first see Kasuga and Nakamura in their hideout is a great example. The use of the book burning as a light source is fantastic, and it gives the scene a lot of atmosphere. It's worth mentioning that this is straight from the page of the manga, but seeing it in live action is amazing and well done. Seeing the fire reflection in Nakamura's glasses is also an excellent shot, so props to the film here for being faithful to the manga. When Nakamura and Kasuga are in what appears to be an abandoned building, we have this dark moonlight scene, which looks quite good, especially compared to other scenes in this film. It definitely adds to the scene, as this is where Nakamura opens up a bit more and talks about not being able to find the quote-unquote exit. This is a pretty good example of some mood lighting. If they had used the bland flat lighting from earlier scenes, it would have absolutely ruined this moment. Another scene which has some really good lighting that's worth a mention is when both Nakamura and Kasuga are on the side of the road of the day of the summer festival. It's one of the very few moments in the film where we actually have an evening shot. We see the dust colours in the sky, the oranges and reds, and it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful shot. It helps to naturally transition from here to the summer festival that takes place at night. So now we're going to do some scene by scene comparisons of both the film and anime. We will have a look at some key moments from the story and compare them. But first, let's do some quickfire comparisons before delving into some of the bigger scenes. Nakamura's stare down of her teacher in episode 1. The look and expression on the anime version of Nakamura is amazing. The way she responds to her teacher just shows that she doesn't care at all. But the stare down is intense thanks to the way the scene is framed. There is a slow zoom in with the background being blurred out. Her face essentially dominates the whole screen. We then cut to a close-up of one of her eyes, which creates this very menacing tone, which is greatly enhanced by the sound design. The film version really doesn't add any tension in her stare down. It doesn't have this menacing look or feeling like the anime version does. This could be down to the film actor's portrayal because it doesn't really give off this sense of threatening or disdain that she has for the teacher. Also, the film version doesn't use any sound effects to enhance the scene. You may also notice that the film version doesn't hold on the stare as much as the anime. The film version holds on Nakamura's stare for approximately 3 seconds, whereas the anime holds on for 8 seconds. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it is noticeable. Kasuga riding his bike after school. In the film, Kasuga briefly monologues about how he is sorry for taking the gym clothes. In the anime, he not only does this, but this is where Kasuga monologues about his feeling about the town, how he feels like he is trapped inside it. We see him riding faster and faster, and he's screaming, he's letting out his emotions, his frustration.
この町に何人いる？なぜ全ての鉄が錆びてるんだ？
Whereas the film version doesn't really convey these emotions. I think the actor is trying to portray a pained look on his face, but it looks more like he's just knackered from riding his bike.
ごめん、佐伯さん。僕はこの罪を一生償っていくよ。
Nakamura drenching Kasuga at the end of his date. The anime version has Nakamura sprint over to Kasuga and pour a large bucket of water over his head. It's pretty intense compared to the Coke can that she sprays over his shirt in the film. It feels far more believable that a completely drenched shirt would be see-through compared to the Coke stains. The way the anime version is edited as well is that we get Nakamura's point of view as she rushes towards Kasuga. Then we have this really strange repeating scene. The film version starts off kind of promising, with Nakamura slowly walking up from behind as we see her in the background as she gets closer and closer. It does kind of add a kind of horror-esque feeling to it, but the payoff is ultimately underwhelming.
大丈夫？今のって中村さん。
ちょっと今急に用事思い出しちゃったからまた明日。
春日君。
In both the anime and the film, we see Kasuga in an empty classroom to get his book. Now here is where the film version shows many of its issues that we've already discussed. Firstly, the lighting of the scene. It's very bland. We see in the anime that it's a late afternoon or evening time shot. We also have this more pronounced darkened classroom environment compared to the film with this yellowish hue seen in the background. Secondly, the pacing of the anime slowly builds up to the moment of Kasuga noticing the gym bag. Just before he enters the classroom, he has these inner thoughts of how his friends don't understand how wonderful Saeki is. He talks about how he has this crush on her and how he views her as a muse.
俺はもう1年もずっと佐伯さんのことを好きなんだからな。俺のミューズ、俺のファムファタルなんだからな。
We also get insight into one of his worries that someone like Saeki doesn't know that he reads books like The Flowers of Evil, and what would she think if she did? We get a close-up of Kasuga in this scene. We see this dull, blank look on his face. He looks jaded, like there's nothing inside him. During this close-up, we hear this foreboding music building up. This is then followed by the crackling sound effect with brief images of a black flower shaking to life. And then we hear a loud thump of a bag falling on the ground. The sound is clearly amplified to give it more impact, to make this moment more significant. This is the moment when the flowers of evil blooms within Kasuga. We hear the very creepy outro song called Last Flower play, and he notices the gym clothes. We see Kasuga come to life as his eyes light up, and we see the flower's eye beginning to open. The movie version does have him talk to himself about his friends and how he thinks they're idiots, as well as how he sees Saeki as his muse. When the bag falls, we get this ticking music playing, which stops when Kasuga comes to his senses and tries to leave the classroom. I think this is supposed to be similar to the anime, where it indicates that something is awakening within Kasuga, but it doesn't really leave any impact on the viewer. The music when he goes to pick up and smell the clothes also doesn't have much impact either. We have this classical instrumental music with like harps, pianos and violins, which attempts to create this eerie horror-esque type of music, but it just feels cheesy. Which is a shame, as the actor does a decent job here with him holding the clothes and smelling them. The acting here is good, with the exhaling of air followed by the facial expression, which looks like he is in ecstasy, which is pretty decent and pretty creepy. What puts the anime version ahead of the film is how it feels more like Kasuga is fighting this urge to take the bag, but his lust has overtaken him. Kasuga can be seen violently moving his hand away in an attempt to stop himself doing something weird. We hear his inner voice. It's telling him to stop as he gets on his knees and opening the bag. He's pleading with himself to stop. The body and facial acting in this scene is brilliant, as the way he holds the gym clothes aloft in this strange position, it's almost as if he's holding them up like he's worshipping them, which is one interpretation you can make, as he's on his knees and the shot looks like someone is praying. Don't forget, he sees her as a muse, his femme fatale. Later in the series, we get this vision of her as an angel, so this position feels more deliberate because it's a very unnatural way to hold something. Not only that, the juxtaposition between what we see on screen and the music really emphasizes the creep factor. The music is very calm, blissful, which contrasts with a kid feeling up some clothes. We once again get this faint crackling effect of the flower, which we first heard at the end of episode 1. There is a close-up of Kasuga's face in the anime, which seems to be in this euphoric state. The scene itself has this soft blur filter to show that Kasuga is on cloud 9, which to anyone else who sees him, this would be very disturbing. The anime does a very effective job of making this scene more disturbing. The film makes a decent attempt, but the pacing and timing for this scene is much quicker in comparison, and if you're trying to build suspense, you need to be slower. This one is going to be tricky to discuss, so forewarn that this scene does have some physical assault and someone getting forcefully undressed. I was debating whether or not to talk about this scene, but it's a very shocking scene that stands out in both the anime and the film, and I thought it was worth doing a comparison, so feel free to skip this part if you so wish. In the anime, this is where Nakamura wants the essay that she told Kasuga to write. However, he doesn't write one, and essentially she punishes him for not doing so and forces him to wear Saki's gym clothes. In the film version, it's the same, but it's preceded by Kasuga asking out Saeki and is followed by the date itself with Kasuga wearing the gym clothes underneath his own. By doing this, the film essentially removes the story point of Nakamura demanding Kasuga to meet her every day after school, as well as removing the later moments in the anime and manga where she meets him before the date and corners him in the bathroom stall to make him wear it again. In theory, I understand why they combine the library and the date scene together, as it helps to condense the story for a limited runtime. As long as you can convey a compelling scene with good acting, use of music and framing, you can change and combine story elements to streamline it, but this scene is underwhelming compared to the anime version. There is this frantic element to the anime which the film version lacks. The anime has a few shots from a distance showing Nakamura overpowering Kasuga as he attempts to get away from her. We get this intense close-up of the action as well, as the actors are moving around as she undresses Kasuga and forces him to wear the gym clothes. It provides enough context to indicate that there is a struggle, whereas the film version, it doesn't have the same vibe. The film has Nakamura push Kasuga down to the ground. She then punches him in the stomach to knock the wind out of him. As mentioned earlier, the physical acting in the film in general is very subpar, and each time Nakamura is physical with Kasuga, it feels like the actor is holding back as to not actually hurt the other actor. That punch felt like it had no weight to it whatsoever, and it doesn't look like it could immobilize Kasuga for that long. He is weak, but not that weak. There needs to be more of a struggle here. The film makes this scene look awkward and poorly acted, as we see her clearly dress the guy with no resistance whatsoever.
ド変態が
The use of music in the film doesn't add to this scene. We once again hear this ticking song, which is used twice already in previous scenes in the film.
私はガーッとふわっと春日君のそのまんま出たぐっちゃぐちゃの作文会を見たかったの。体操着
The anime uses 3 different tracks before, during and after Nakamura's assault. It starts with this somber ambient music as Kasuga disputes Nakamura's claims of him being a deviant.
なんなんだよわけわかんねえよ昨日といい今日といい何考えてんだよ中村さんあの教室の雰囲気見たかよ誰だよ不審者って佐伯さんまで変な目で見られて俺は違う
When she tackles him, the music naturally transitions to something of a more faster-paced tune, with more instrumentals being added to the music, and this newer tune really adds to the struggle. And as we see these quick cuts on the screen as well, it makes this a more faster-paced scene.
待てよなんでなんだって
It all comes to a climax where Nakamura is towering over Kasuga, showing that she is in control, and proceeds to confess her disdain for the world and how she wants to be a deviant. The music returns to a slower pace, similar to the music heard earlier, but it has a darker, more foreboding tone to it, with these deeper basses in the music.
これから毎日放課後は私と一緒に過ごそうそうしよう
佐伯さんの体操着は僕の肌に張り付いて
The film doesn't put any thought into its music, so it doesn't have any impact on this scene. Lastly is the acting from our two leads. Discussing the film version first, Kasuga is mostly winded and knocked out in the film version of this scene and hardly emotes when Nakamura is talking to him about her feelings. We see her lean in to whisper into his ear, but Kasuga's actor hardly reacts to what she's saying. In the anime version, he is fully conscious and he watches Nakamura towering over him, and when she leans over to him, you get this sense that this is a man who has lost all control and she is in charge. He is listening to every word she says.
どんな気持ち？春日君、私ね、もうずっと前からムズムズしてるの。体の下の方の中の方が叫び声を上げたくなるほどモヤモヤしてるの。この世界全部私のモヤモヤの中でクソ虫になればいいと思う。
In this scene, he looks like he is silently panicking over the whole situation because there's nothing he can do. The anime version of Nakamura shows the twisted pleasure and joy that she gets from this. The smile she has before she leans down has this sadistic vibe to it. The way she whispers into Kasuga's ear adds to her seductress feeling of her character.
私と契約できたのは春日君だけなんだよ。
And add on top of that, the camera angles here look very suggestive, which I think is a intentional choice due to the topics that this anime covers. The film version is a bit more reserved. There is a hint of sadistic joy from the film version of Nakamura, but she doesn't command any dominance like her anime counterpart.
春日君、私ね、もうずっと前からムズムズしてるの。 体の下の方の中の方がもうずーっとモヤモヤしてる。この世界全部私のモヤモヤの中でクソ虫になればいいって思う。春日くんと同じ。 私もきっと変態なの。
Now, we've already discussed and talked about various elements of the mountain scene already, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much here. One of the big differences between the anime and the film version is the use of rain. In the anime, the rainfall is constant, it doesn't let up at all. The film version, on the other hand, the rain ends when Saeki arrives to confront them and resumes when Kasuga is alone, kneeling on the floor screaming in emotional pain and frustration. I personally feel that this scene is better with the constant rainfall, as it adds this great ambient noise in the background rather than just generic night noises heard in the film version.
中村さんのこと好きなの？え？中村さんのことが好きなの？違う。
The use of sound, or even the lack of sound, is used to great effect within the anime. When Kasuga is stripped naked by Nakamura, there's this brief moment for about 8 seconds where we cut to a close-up of Kasuga's face and you can see that he is just emotionally drained there. And there's this intense wind sound effect which sharply cuts back to the rain noise. We also have the crackle and thumping sounds of the flowers of evil as we cut to a backdrop and imagery of Kasuga wearing these gym clothes.
匂い嗅ぎまくりこすりつけまくりのおめえのクソ体操着体にまとわりつかせてズクンズクンしてたんだよ。春日くんは心にずっと体操着を着てる。皮全部ひんむいた本当の体に突っ張りへばりついてる。
Even when Nakamura leaves and Kasuga chases after her, there are some shots which are in slow-mo, and there are parts where the sound is drowned out and then suddenly reappears for dramatic effect, such as when Kasuga reaches out to Nakamura to stop her leaving, or when Saeki reaches out to Kasuga.
Nakamura-san! Nakamura-san.
The film version doesn't do anything with its sound, it just has some ambient sounds and adds a somewhat melancholy piece of music over Kasuga's monologue in an attempt to give that scene more emotional weight.
俺は僕は悪の花を読んでる。渋沢達彦を、ブルトンを、萩原作太郎を、馬体を読んでる。でもだから何なんだ。
Now, this moment on the mountain is a huge moment for all three of these characters. They are now at the crossroads of their relationships, so the drama and tension needs to be present in these scenes, which is why the anime uses so many different visual and audio techniques to amplify this moment. It leaves an impression on the viewer as well as enhance the drama of this moment. The film version of this scene doesn't hold any kind of weight to it. There is no sense of drama or tension at all. An example of that is when Nakamura stomps and rips up the Flowers of Evil book in front of Kasuga. In the anime, we have this great shot where the cover is destroyed, it's muddy, and it's thrown into the face of Kasuga. It's fantastic. However, that scene is completely absent from the film counterpart. Instead, we have her rip it up and just stamp on it on the floor. This moment is meant to be a metaphor about Kasuga's personality. He is defined by this book, well, more so in the anime than in the film version, but seeing it being destroyed, dirtied up, ripped apart, it's similar to what has happened to Kasuga right now. He has exposed himself as being a poser and thus destroying this personality that he has been building up for ages. That ruined cover on his face, that's how he feels right now, and having that imagery missing from the film means that this scene loses a lot of its intended meaning. This whole section of the film really highlights the biggest issue of the film, and that is the lack of context. The compelling relationships between Nakamura, Kasuga and Saeki are missing. We don't see the attempts from Saeki to understand Kasuga. We don't see Nakamura pretending to be Saki's friend like in the anime. We've only had one scene in the film where both these characters talk to each other before this event. However, the biggest element that is missing in the film is that we don't see Saeki confront Nakamura leading up to this event. We see a few times in anime where Saeki and Nakamura will clash over Kasuga. Nakamura is constantly trying to convince Saeki that he's a deviant, but she's adamant to disprove her. And due to the secrets that Kasuga keeps and what Nakamura has been saying, it has grown suspicion within her. In the anime, this whole segment, this whole episode, is where the characters pretty much lay bare their thoughts and emotions. We learn that Kasuga is essentially a poser. He tries to be different by reading these books, but he doesn't understand what he's reading. He sees himself as an empty person, but more importantly, he confesses that he is in love with the idea, the concept of Saeki. He didn't want to know her as a human being because he would rather have the fantasy of her, his femme fatale, his so-called muse. Nakamura thinks that maybe there is nothing on the other side, and even Saeki, as mentioned earlier, we see her desperation to understand Kasuga as she is a woman that needs to be loved as well as be loved. She wants to know why she isn't good enough. What is it about Nakamura that drives Kasuga towards her? Just to give some examples of how the lack of context hurts this film, here are two examples from this scene. Firstly, the scene where Saeki arrives at the bus shelter. How does she know those two ran off? How does she know where to look for them? She just arrives because the story said she does. There's no context. The anime gives us that. She finds out that Kasuga is missing because she sees his mum looking for him. She also goes around asking people if they have seen Nakamura and Kasuga, and she gets hints as to where they've gone. Even when she finds them, it was basically luck, as she was passing them on the bike and sees them just out of the corner of her eye. Another example of how the lack of context hurts the film is the scene after Kasuga confesses. Both Saeki and Nakamura, they just leave, followed by Kasuga screaming in the rain before we fade out.
僕は中村さんを向こう側へ連れて行けなかった。
This raises the question, why is Nakamura back in school later on in the film? In the anime, we see that police come and take them back home. We see Nakamura attempt to run away but is stopped by the police. and we have this moment where she is just screaming and trying to break free from the police, only for the episode to end with all three characters completely emotionally and physically drained by the whole experience. That feeling of defeat is not just felt at the end of the episode, but in the following episode as well when they're back in school. That whole moment is completely absent from the film and never develops on the fallout of this event. The moment when Kasuga enters Nakamura's room is pretty much the basis of the last episode of the anime. This moment is significant as we get an insight into the character of Nakamura. So let's begin by looking at the reveal of her bedroom door. I know that sentence sounds silly and boring because why would there be anything interesting about a bedroom door? But hear me out on this one. In the anime, Kasuga sees a door down a long corridor as he slowly walks toward it, while this foreboding thumping sound and music can be heard, which sounds similar to that of a heartbeat. You do get a sense that he is drawn towards it. Once again, Kasuga's urge has taken hold of him, similar to the end of episode 1. We get a sense of hesitation from the body actor throughout this scene as it takes its time to slowly build up him entering the room. The film version is much faster in comparison. It doesn't want to or can't take its time to build up any tension. When we see the door, Kasuga is like a foot away from it. There's a brief moment of hesitation before he heads in. There's no sense that Kasuga is attempting to resist going in or is reluctant to follow through with what's basically invading a person's personal space. The interior of Nakamura's room is shot very differently in both the anime and the film. The anime makes use of Dutch angles, so everything is at a slight tilt. We see this when there are wide shots of Kasuga in the room, whereas the film mainly has one wide shot as Kasuga pulls back the curtains to reveal the interior. We have Kasuga looking around very briefly before focusing on the diary. The anime takes its time to slowly show the different elements of Nakamura's room, with various close-ups of different sections of the room, items, clothing, and furniture. The film does leave out a creepy line from Kasuga about how the room smells like Nakamura.
Nakamura-san no niyoi ga suru.
Kasuga in the anime is taking his time to take in the environment. It feels like he is analysing the room as the show takes its time to slowly look around it. Another difference between the film and the anime is the dressing of Nakamura's room. The anime version feels empty, and I think that was an intentional choice. In this series, we see Kasuga's room. In fact, we see it many times in the anime, and we get a glimpse of Saki's room when Kasuga visits her. Their bedrooms are dressed in a way that reflects the character's personality. A bedroom is everyone's safe space. It's personal. You arrange it, store, and decorate in a way that represents you. Kasuga's room in particular shows his love for the written word, as it is surrounded by books. There's even a picture of Charles Baudelaire on the shelf, and we see it multiple times in the series. This shows his adoration for him. Nakamura's, in contrast, is barren. We see like 2 pairs of clothing, some books, and also holes in the wall. Nakamura doesn't seem to have many worldly possessions, which makes sense. She doesn't care about anything or anyone, so she has no interest or anything in her town, and her room reflects that. Those holes indicate that she has violent tendencies and outbursts. She probably did it to let out her internal anger, rage, and frustration. The movie version is very loud in comparison and contrasts her character rather than complement it. Her desk is cluttered with notebooks and papers. Is this for schoolwork? Because it's established that she doesn't care or bother with her studies, so why would she have this on her desk? We even see what looks to be a pink bag on the desk as well, which doesn't seem like something a character like Nakamura would own. If anything, this is an item that Saeki would own rather than Nakamura, so it doesn't fit her style or personality. The desk in the anime is very minimal, hardly anything on it. The only prominent item is her diary. The last episode of anime can feel like a clip show, as every page that Kasuga reads, you do get these black and white flashbacks to previous events in the story. But I think what it does, it recontextualizes these scenes, but also recontextualizes her interactions with Kasuga. Seeing the way she writes shows that she's interested in Kasuga because she believes that he is the same as her, and she wants to encourage him to become a pervert and a deviant, not just because she gets fun and pleasure out of seeing him squirm, which we know that she does, but when reading her diary, we get a glimpse of her inner thoughts and feelings. feelings. The way she writes and the little drawings that accompany them, like the happy little skulls, even emphasizing some of the sentences with like a power or bam backdrop. These little things in her diary shows that she is happy. She's happy to finally find someone that she can connect to and relate to. We already know how she views everyone and that she's a social outcast due to her behavior. So her finding someone who is similar to herself means that she isn't alone, and those pages reflect that. And the crushing pain that Kasuga feels as he's flicking frantically through the blank pages only to find her last message, he understands that this is a woman who is defeated and has given up because of him. And you see and feel Kasuga's remorse as he realizes what he has done to her. The film version also shows us the diary pages, which does give some insight into the film version of Nakamura. It's shortened in comparison to the anime as it doesn't use any flashbacks, which is fine as this is a feature-length film. So for viewers, it isn't hours ago or weeks ago since they last saw these moments, so we don't need a constant reminder of what we've already seen. You could argue that the last episode of the anime is padding, which is a fair criticism for the overuse of flashbacks to extend the running time. However, the quicker pace and the use of music in the film version really weakens the impact of this scene. A good example is when Kasuga is flicking through the empty pages. In the anime, there's this frantic nature to it, but not in the film. The music used during this whole segment is extremely underwhelming in the film. This tune that plays sounds like something out of a 16-bit RPG. Compare that to the anime, which constantly uses these ethereal sounds which help to create a foreboding effect. And when the music hits a crescendo, as Kasuga is flicking through the pages quickly to see the last entry, it is very effective. And it helps to add tension to the scene, making the reveal of Nakamura's last entry way more impactful for the viewer. Even the entrance of Nakamura is vastly different in both the anime and the film. In the anime, we can hear in the background a running noise. It's muffled, but as Nakamura approaches the bedroom door, the sound becomes more prominent and concludes with a loud kick that swings the door open. In contrast, the film just has her slowly enter through an open doorway. There isn't any build up to her appearance here. When we see Nakamura in the anime version, her facial expressions are really hard to read, but in a good way. We see many different reactions at first. There's a smile on her face, but when she grabs the diary, she sounds angry, but at the same time she kinda looks impressed. She doesn't fully show her frustration and anger until the very end, where she is on top of Kasuga screaming. The film version of Nakamura clearly has this pained smile on her face, which is pretty good, but then it goes into this angry scream and it clearly shows her anger, but it's not very subtle as it is very over the top. Even when she is on top of Kasuga and screaming at him, she has this weird boggled-eyed look again, and she repeatedly calls him a shitbug, but the delivery here doesn't have any weight to it at all. Even the way she kind of pulls on his tie and pushes him down, again, it's another example of the physical acting here feeling restrained. But the only emotion that is portrayed here is anger. Whereas in the anime, there are hints and even brief moments where Nakamura's voice is hurt, she is in pain, and even on her face as well. It's only the second time in the anime where Nakamura really shows any kind of vulnerability. The last scene comparison I want to go over is the infamous scene in which both Nakamura and Kasuga trash their middle school classroom. This scene is absolutely beautiful in the anime, and I feel like this film butchers it. And as someone who loves the anime, it's painful to watch the film's interpretation of this scene. So let's compare both the anime and film version, and I'll try my very best not to die inside. Let's start off by going over the lighting. The anime goes for a dark scene with this blue tint, making the classroom interior look like it's lit by moonlight. The film version is also set at night, but the colouring has this strange yellow/green tint to the whole scene. It might be trying to be more realistic, as it seems the light source may be a nearby street lamp which is outside, which creates this yellow colours which blend in with the cream walls and the colour of the chalkboard that creates this effect. It's visually interesting compared to the other lighting setups we had in the film so far, but it looks ugly in comparison to the anime. We do have a shot at the end of the classroom destruction scene where it does have this bluer tint due to the early morning sun and the ink stained windows. So it was possible to create this look that's in the anime, so this must have been an intentional choice to avoid too much comparison between the two, but that's just pure speculation, as this style could have been chosen to create more natural looking light from a clear light source. The way Kasuga writes the confession in the anime is fast paced and continuously increases the pace the more he writes. The anime makes good use of quick cuts and intense close-up of Kasuga. His facial expression and the quick writing with the quick cuts on the chalkboard makes this confession have this emotional passion behind it, whereas the movie version has the viewer watch the writer write the whole confession as quickly as he can with barely any cuts. We do get some side views of Kasuga a few times, but we're essentially watching this actor attempt to write this confession as quickly as possible, and it's very awkward and dull to watch, especially in comparison to the anime. The vandalism and destruction of the classroom in the anime is done in a very artistic way. It makes good use of slow motion. There are various parts that are slowed down for dramatic effect and then suddenly goes back into regular motion. The movements of Kasuga and Nakamura never feel slowed down or has any sense of a struggle. It flows, it feels continuous, almost like a dance. The anime also has this glow effect to make the scene brighter and more visually striking. The film version clearly takes some inspiration from the anime. There is no doubt in my mind about this. The film version shows more destructive elements. We actually see the actors throwing things around and destroying things, whereas the anime is more suggestive, such as the shots of a desk being thrown around, ink splatters, and various classroom objects being thrown around. We don't actually see the characters throw them around, but we can interpret it, which is a bit more imaginative and again has this more artistic feeling to it. In the film version, we get various shots of Kasuga and Nakamura destroying the room, but it's quite lackluster in the way it's presented. The film version of Kasuga, for instance, when he's painting the classroom, it feels really awkward as we see him running back and forth to paint the windows. It doesn't have the same flow like the anime. For example, there's this one really awkward moment whilst he's painting the windows where Kasuga just randomly shouts out Baudelaire. It's just weird and hokey. However, there is one good shot in the film, which is when Kasuga is circling Nakamura as he paints the outline of the Flower of Evil. It makes really good use of slow motion and then cutting back into regular motion. There are various quick cuts during this scene as well, and we even have Nakamura dancing on the table, which is in slow motion as well, which is more impressive than early elements of this scene. However, the movie version does miss out an absolutely beautiful shot, which is where we have a close-up of the moon as it dissolves into the classroom from a bird's eye view, as we see Nakamura, Kasuga, and the gym clothes on the floor in the center of this trash room with this large painting of the Flowers of Evil. It's an amazing visual in the manga as well as in the anime, which is omitted in the film version, which is a grave mistake. The use of music and sound effects in the film version of this scene goes for a very different tone compared to its anime counterpart. The anime removes all environmental and character voice acting when Kasuga begins to paint the classroom. The only prominent sound in the scene is the song Hana. Now, up to this point, the anime has well established its musical identity. At the end of every episode, we hear this incredible, eerie, spine-chilling cover of this song, which is titled A Last Flower. It's an unnerving song that viewers have heard numerous times, so having this ethereal, calming, and strangely beautiful version of this song really heightens this scene. It's not just some kids vandalizing a classroom, it's a moment of freedom, of release, of pure catharticism for these characters. The song Hana represents this. There is no fear, no worries, no dread when listening to that song compared to The Last Flower. The film version keeps most of the audio so we can hear the destruction as it appears on screen. But when Kasuga starts painting the flower, that's when the environmental and character audio is removed and we just have the music track, which becomes the most prominent piece of sound. The music choice in this scene uses a punky J-pop song. The moment this song starts is similar to in the anime where Kasuga throws a chalk in the air. You can clearly see that the movie did take some elements of the anime for this moment. The moment this J-pop song starts is when you truly see the differences in interpretations from both directors. The music here creates a very different tone and style compared to the anime. As the music is more pop punk, it creates a more carefree, playful tone, like these two characters are just raging against the machine in a cool fashion. Which yeah, they are raging against the status quo in both versions, but the way the anime wants to convey this is in a more mature manner, as the imagery and use of music in the anime can be interpreted in different ways, and as such, I have one theory about this particular scene in the anime. Me and my friend Rob have talked about this scene many times in our personal lives, and we've briefly only mentioned our interpretation of this scene in our commentary. But the way we view this is that this is essentially a metaphorical love scene or metaphorical sex scene. This story has a lot of sexual undertones throughout the series. Kasuga's voyeuristic tendencies is one aspect, but also Nakamura constantly talking about Kasuga being a pervert, teasing about getting physical with Saeki, and even some of the comments about herself, such as when she talks about something writhing in her lower half. And again, again, this anime is all about the intense emotions and feelings of going through puberty. So some of the imagery being suggestive is very intentional, and I think that some of the imagery in the classroom also fits this as well. How you may be wondering? Well, one way that we interpret this scene is that these characters right now are driven by pure passion and lust to express themselves. This is them expressing their disdain for society and their town. You can see that they are just blind and lost in the moment. They don't have a care in the world. This is a release for both of them, and it is purely cathartic. Their body and facial expressions really add to this interpretation as well, especially Nakamura. The way she dances around, the close-up of her hips, the way she arches her back could be seen in a slightly suggestive way, but when you add Nakamura's facial expression into the mix, such as when she's laughing or screaming in joy, you can clearly see that she is blushing, and it gives us this sort of sensual vibe, again kind of reinforcing our interpretation of this scene. The ink being thrown around could also be seen as suggestive, but when both Nakamura and Kasuga are on the floor, the viewer can clearly hear them breathing heavily, they're gasping for air. The camera angles look suggestive, but also when Nakamura is looking at Kasuga and calls him a hentai, there is this almost loving and caring tone in her voice that we haven't seen from her before. The film version doesn't have the same tone. The music that is used, the action on screen just seems more childish, and it feels like characters are just having fun. Which granted, yes, they are kids, but the subject matter that is covered in Aku No Hana is very mature. The anime understands this, so these characters trashed in the classroom has more meaning in the anime compared to the film. The film version doesn't have as much depth in comparison, such as the facial expressions from Nakamura and Kasuga, the way they're laughing and giggling. It makes this scene more playful, more high-spirited, which is amplified by the J-pop song that accompanies the imagery. You know what, I don't even know why I'm even doing this. What is the point of me even making this fucking video? It's just useless, it's pointless. No one's gonna see it. No one's gonna watch an hour-long video about Aku No Hana, about an anime that no one gave a shit about back in 2013, and sure didn't give a shit about it now. What, just because there's some live action film? Nobody gave a shit about the film, nobody gave a shit about the anime, only me, Rob, and maybe some other people cared, but no one else cares about this. So why do I even bother? Why am I even making this video for you bunch of fucking shitbugs, 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 shitbugs?
It ended at a point where the story is just about to get going. So I think it would make sense if they did a season 2. And that's the other thing. Why would they say part 1 or end of part 1 if they're not going to do a second season? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
And this is pretty much where we end. You know, Kasuga saying to Nakamura, let's have another contract. Let's go over the hill. So I can't wait to see if we're going to get a season 2. If not, I'm going to jump into the manga. I'm only going to hold off the manga until I see if we're going to get season 2 or not to avoid spoilers. But yeah, it's just a confounding series and story, and it amazes me.
The other main reason I don't particularly buy into Aku no Hana's horror elements, and in fact the main concern I have with the series as a whole, is this. These characters are not relatable at all.
Flowers of Evil isn't for everyone, but it is very much worth your time if you're looking for something different and real. We might not be able to fully fathom the emotions the characters go through, but there's no doubt you will remember a time full of pent-up tension and insecurity like this. It's definitely not always a happy time, but it makes us who we are.
This anime was nothing more than one man's poor attempt at forcing his artistic views on both the viewers and even his own staff, who despite their efforts won't receive much compensation based off of Blu-ray sales alone. It's a shameful production that would be better off forgotten.
It's direction choices like these that really made the series. If you strip away the nuances the animation team decided to add, you're left with a rather mediocre and lackluster series that would lose most, if not all, its poignancy. In fact, tone is almost everything in this series. All of its impact rests on its ability to pull you in during those key moments, where it writes a story of its own, all in the back of your mind.
Honestly, I felt it was really a disservice to the excellent manga it was based upon. I was really, really disappointed. And it's not just because the animation. The animation is a major factor, and it was absolutely terrible. A real mistake. But it was also the pacing, the entire atmosphere was wrong.
Aku no Hana is a dark, psychological, and eerily familiar anime. Probably because of his rotoscoped animation from live action, or his overall impactful message. His music, theme, and pacing is well timed. His depth of characters and movement is refreshing yet uneasy.
In so many areas. I don't care what you say. The image style looks so bad. It makes me want to drop this anime series. Who can stand look at the ugly animation style and the ugly character designs? Character designs look so good in the manga. Why not just make it based on that? The anime studio tried too hard to make the anime artistic. The animation looks so bad at times, where the characters were moving around, but it looked way too choppy.
I actually feel like the rotoscope look of the show works better than even what the manga decided to do. The pacing is absolutely better. The way pages were laid out in the manga was just too abrupt a lot of the time. It didn't really give you panels to breathe. Aku no Hana's anime adaptation elevated the source material in pretty much every conceivable way, and I liked the source material to begin with. But from sound design to performances to the visuals, I really wish we had had a season 2 with this team working on it.
Would affect me as much as
rotoscoping
is shit. I've said this before.
Rotoscope was actually a pretty good idea.
So why make them look so hideous?
To make you feel very
I have never
unsettled,
seen an animation style this horrific.
What our protagonist was feeling.
Supports that. It's also very raw in a way that traditional means of animation don't often capture. This is a very real story about the very real ways that people can become so very ugly. And the only reason this show got as much attention as it did was because of its advent approach towards animation.
No, I really do feel season 2 because the show pretty much says at the very end season 2.
No, it's just something I'm like, oh, we should know what happened. We built up this character. The character is now this certain way. You obviously already when season 2 comes up, to watch it, but just continue and
no. You'll be surprised. Our good man of the hood.
World is out there.
Hey, Boders!
That other side of the hill doesn't exist.
You have a genuine experimental psychological horror.
You will go
it just
the hill.
Find
that life is pretty much
I don't get it. Like the fact what they've done is they've added all of these may not be known as little things that add up actually slightly this incredible experience. And it's all about reading into stuff.
I think it's
all about thinking about it and having time to think. And the show gives you, the death notes, the cowboy bebop. We're not being dicks.
This animated anime you
no,
want
I think
when
it's
you
fair.
read
I think
it,
it's
some
fair to
sort
say
of
that
Dark Knight reference.
This is the anime the world needs. I'm sorry, but this is how we see it. Okay, you either die a hero like live long enough to see yourself become Bleach. Painful. Coasting off of it. But like the choice of angles, the choice of pacing, the choice of music. Still shit.
This movie is just speeding forever. Like,
when we were
most of our
starting
attachment to the
20s,
characters have come
I
from
just kind
other
of
sources.
when
Spend a lot
watched
of
anime
time
originally, because that was kind of like in
kind
our
of see
anime
something
originally.
like
I think
that
that's when
again.
our
Like, you know,
relationship was,
we're
like,
younger
real strong as well.
when
So, like,
that
I
original
look
one
back at
came
Aku No
out.
Hana
And
with
we're
very fond
older now.
memories.
One message deserves to come out of this. Through all of the shit that you hear on the internet about Aku No Hana, the Flowers of Evil, this is easily one of the best animated featured things ever made.
I've been wondering for a while now how I'm going to end this video. What's the conclusion going to be? Am I going to give a definitive ranking of which version is better? Although I think if you watch this whole video, it's quite clear which one I prefer. I've been thinking about this a lot. I keep wondering how I'm going to sign off talking about Aku No Hana. Honestly, I don't know. As I write this, I find it really difficult to express myself and my love for this series. A part of me wanted to do a rant about the anime community's reaction to this show, but honestly, I've kind of already done that. I think what I really want to talk about is why I made this video. What drove me to do this? When watching the film, I couldn't help but think back to 2013, remembering all the reactions to this show and the slow drip of news over the next year or so about a possible new season, until it was all but confirmed that season 2 will never happen. I sometimes wonder if the anime would have been saved if it was brought over to a streaming service. The anime landscape has changed so much over the course of the 2010s. Netflix, Amazon have put a lot of funding into various anime projects, and I have to wonder if something like Aku No Hana would have been given a chance there. When the anime came out, people were mourning and complaining about the look and kept asking, what is the point in animating it? Just do a live action series. Well, the 2019 film kind of shows the uniqueness and creativity that the anime had. A part of that is down to the animation style, but also it's down to the directorial styles as well. The film has allowed me to fully appreciate the creative decisions and imagery that is used in the anime. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about its adaptations was to give myself a sense of closure. The anime never got a chance to tell the whole story. The overall story of Aku No Hana in the manga and the film has a hopeful message at the end. Kasuga and Nakamura have been through a lot of internal struggles and pain as they have tried to find their place in this world. As much as I discussed why I didn't like the film, the moment where Kasuga, Nakamura and Aya are on the beach hashing things out about the past, and when they have this playful moment in the sea with this soothing music, it's peaceful, it's calming. Show that these characters have been able to find a way to move on, that they've accepted their past and be able to start moving forward in their lives. Even if it isn't a super mega happy ending for Nakamura, she is content, and the wounds within not just herself but Kasuga have started to heal. Because the anime version is incomplete, those versions of Kasuga and Nakamura that myself and Rob fell in love with, that were captivated by every time they were on screen together, will never get to that point. They will never find their happiness, they will never heal, they're forever stuck in this moment, unable to move on, unable to move past their pain. And as someone who loves the anime, it hurts not being able to see the story complete. It hurts not seeing these characters be able to find that content. And in all honesty, it hurts to see an anime that has amazing art, that is beautiful, that is deep, never being able to tell the full story is heartbreaking. One thing this film has done for me is that it has allowed me to see the story through to the end, even though it's very much a bullet point version of the events in the manga. I totally understand why Rob hates it and why he advised people to go read the manga after seeing the anime, because you'll see the true ending to the story. The film has allowed Aku No Hana to be somewhat revived. It got people talking about it again. People still talk about the show and people still revere it to this day, and I really hope the anime lives on, and I really hope it doesn't fall into obscurity. This film has allowed me to revisit the anime again. Not having a conclusion to the anime has always been heartbreaking for me, and being able to see it end was nice, and being able to talk about it passionately again for one last time, it's bittersweet. For me, I'm finally able to close this chapter of my life.